Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Welcome to another episode of Ask Rob and Rob. You know how this works. You send in questions, we answer them, everyone goes away a bit more knowledgeable and hopefully a little bit more happy as well. Today's questions do not disappoint. We've got a couple of corkers, but I'm sure you can match them. So here's how you can send in a question of your own.
Yeah, super simple. The number remains the same. It's 013 808 00035. That's 013 808 00035. Or you can go to propertyhub.net/ask. Whichever way you do it, we don't mind. We just want a nice question. And you know what, Rob? We've got two lovely ones today. Let's listen to the first one.
Hey Rob and Rob, my name is Pete and my question is about the 18-year property cycle. From what I gather, we're about 7 years away from the next crash. If this is true, then what do we do when the crash is imminent? For example, I have two properties that I bought for about £100,000 each. And if things went amazingly well, just to keep things simple, in 7 years' time, let's say these properties are now worth double at £200,000 each. Do I sell just before the crash and pocket the capital growth, or do I keep hold of them and then risk losing all that capital growth and being back to square one? Obviously, for me, it's all about the rental income each month, but I don't want to miss the opportunity of pocketing all that extra capital growth that I will have built up. So, yeah, what do we do? Because I'm worried that if I sell, which sounds great, and I've got all that money in the bank, paid off the mortgages, I'm worried that we may struggle to buy more after the crash has happened because banks and lenders are keeping hold of their money, and then I'm not going to be able to buy any more properties, and I'll have shot myself in the foot. So yeah, any advice on this would be great. Your thoughts would be much appreciated. Cheers, Rob and Rob.
Thank you, Pete. Great question. And yes, I'm with you. We have now a very exciting 7 years ahead of us. Of course, it could be a year or so out either way. It's not an exact science. But the next 7 years will be very, very interesting and for many people, fruitful for property investors. Those properties that you've mentioned at 100k could very well be worth double in 7 years' time. That wouldn't shock me at all. So what do you do? You know this is coming. You know that you've had great growth. But you also know, because you're clued up, that there's going to be, a major correction and property prices will fall. Well, the first thing to say is that the winner's curse, which is the last 2 years of this cycle, is probably, the time that most people won't want to be buying. Certain strategies will dictate differently, but in the last 2 years, generally, a lot of property investors won't be investing. And that's absolutely fine, because the amount the market falls is normally the growth of the last 2 years. So if you bought 3 or 4 years from the end, you're A-okay. When it dips, it's not going to fall as much as the price you bought in. Okay, so that's great, and that may give you, some reassurance that these properties worth 100 today go to 200 in 7 years, aren't going to go back to 100 again. They'll fall, but nowhere near that much. But I think the winner's curse is also a great time for people who've built out portfolios to review and reflect. I certainly will be doing this, whereas looking at my portfolio and going, right, for the next cycle, what do I want to keep and what do I want to get rid of? And the ones I want to get rid of will probably be the more problematic properties in your portfolio. And if you build a portfolio out, you're always going to have some properties in there that just aren't as good as others. Many times it's the stuff that you bought early on. You've learnt more, you've become a better investor, and you now invest in better properties. So I will look at my portfolio in that last 2 years and start to offload some of them for two reasons. One, so it's my portfolio streamlined and I'm keeping the very best stuff for the next cycle. But the second reason, to realise some capital that once this correction happens, I've got capital to go back in and buy up bargains. So don't worry, you don't have to sell. But if you have got a property or two in your portfolio that isn't delivering as you'd hoped, then that's a great opportunity to sell. And that's probably the only time I'd sell a property unless it was really problematic. Otherwise, I'd just hold. But that 2 year window can be a great opportunity to reflect and possibly trim down your portfolio slightly.
That's it. The key insight here is that each property cycle starts from a higher level than the previous one. So all you've got to do is avoid buying in that winner's curse period and you'll be okay. Now, if you're super confident, you could sell everything and then buy it back a year later at a much lower level. Some people have that as their strategy, and that's perfectly fine, but you don't have to do that. The key is, because you've got this knowledge of the cycle, when everyone out is rushing out and buying and paying silly prices, you can be more reflective and you can decide, am I going to stay put? Am I going to refinance so I can go on a buying spree? Am I going to sell a couple of the worst performers, like Rob said? You've got those options, but all of those options are infinitely better than buying at crazy inflated prices just as things are about to pop. And that is the beauty of knowing about the cycle. Okay, let's have a listen to our second question. Now, this person didn't leave their name, so as I did it last time, Rob, would you like to do the honours and give this caller a name?
Yes, Bartholomew, thank you for your question.
Hi, Rob and Rob. It's been great listening to your podcast. I have been listening for the last 6 to 7 months, and it's amazing. In one of my property, the tenant has been staying for the last 7 years. It was on AST for 6 months, then on periodic basis. Since they have been there for the last 7 years, do they acquire any special rights, i.e. long-term tenancy, like sitting tenancy or whatever? Please, if you could answer that, that would be great. The next question is about a property I'm planning to buy, which has a tenant for the last 3 years, and they have got good records, as mentioned by the agent. I'm planning to buy it. However, what I'm worried, if I buy it and they plan to continue to stay, do they become a sitting tenant? If you could clarify on that, it would be really great. Thank you and keep up the good work. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you, Bart. This is a nice, easy one and some good news for you. You don't need to worry about it. Assuming that the tenant is on an assured short hold tenancy, an AST, and that's something that you would always want to check if you are buying a property, then they did not acquire rights at any particular point. So the property that you've already got, where there's a tenant who's been there for 7 years, fantastic. They're clearly a good tenant. Hang on to them. And for any that you're planning to buy, make sure that your solicitor gets hold of the tenancy agreement so you can check that it is an AST rather than anything else. And of course, you want to check that they're up to date with their rent and that everything regarding the tenancy has been done properly, because you're inheriting everything as it has been done and as it currently is. So make sure that everything is as it should be. And if so, nothing to worry about. You can keep that tenant on if they're happy to do so and if you're happy to have them, and no need to worry about anything at all. It is really important to do all your checks correctly when you are buying a tenanted property. Lots of things that you will want to think about, but thankfully a tenant staying too long is not a concern that you'll need to have.
Well, thank you, Pete. Thank you, Bart. Great questions. We'll be back at the same time next week to do the same again, but different questions and hopefully different names. And we'll also be back on Thursday for the main event, the Property Podcast. You don't want to miss that. So until those two wonderful events occur, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.